Welcome to Hot Topics with another deep dive with your hosts Dan and May, a hot government production.
Okay, so today we're gonna try to connect some dots that might seem pretty random at first glance.
Yeah.
We've got Wisconsin farmland, being sold off. We've got this state budget from way back in 2013.
Oh, wow.
And then there's this bill, AB269, I think it is.
Okay.
And even that whole Foxconn thing.
Yeah.
What could possibly tie all of this together?
Right.
Well, it all comes back to Speaker Robin Vos and his relationship with China.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, how all these different pieces could be part of like a bigger story.
Right.
We'll be looking at concerns that other lawmakers have raised and possible conflicts of interest and even some international agreements.
Yeah.
And how all of that relates back to Speaker Vos and what he's said and done regarding China.
It gets kind of complicated.
It does.
But this is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
We're talking about trips to China, accusations that legislative processes were maybe compromised, and even warnings from some pretty high-up government officials.
Yeah, and what's really important here is to understand what all of this means.
Right.
This isn't just some Wisconsin thing. It's part of a much bigger conversation happening all over the country about foreign influence on, American policy decisions.
Exactly. We're not talking about some theoretical debate here.
Right.
This is about who gets to control American land and resources.
Absolutely.
And how those decisions are made.
Yeah.
And that brings us to Congressman Dan Newhouse's op-ed in Newsweek from 2024.
Yeah.
He lays out some pretty serious concerns about foreign entities, especially China, owning American farmland.
Right. He doesn't hold back, does he? He uses some strong language to describe China's efforts to acquire these important U.S. assets.
Yeah, he talks about a multi-tiered campaign and malicious influence.
Right. And he has some pretty alarming figures to back it up.
Okay.
The USDA says foreign investments in U.S. farmland grew to something like 40 million acres in 2021.
Wow.
To put that in perspective, that's like, the whole state of Nebraska owned by entities outside the U.S.
It's a lot of land.
It is.
And it's not just empty land.
Right.
This affects our food supply chain, too.
Yeah.
We saw this when Governor Kristi Noem testified in front of the House Agriculture Committee in 2024.
Yeah, Governor Noem was very clear about her concerns.
Right.
She thinks China is systematically trying to take over parts of the U.S. food supply.
Yeah, this is a big issue that's definitely gaining traction.
For sure.
And for good reason.
Definitely.
So how does Wisconsin fit into all this?
Right.
Well, back in 2013, Governor Scott Walker tried to repeal those restrictions on foreign ownership of farmland. He even included it in the state budget.
If you think about the bigger picture, the timing of that is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
2013 was also when Walker went to China to open a trade office and even met with President Xi Jinping.
Oh, wow. Makes you wonder if there was more to that trip than we knew at the time.
Right.
And if those discussions had anything to do with his push for open farmland ownership.
It's certainly a question worth asking, but it's important to remember that Walker's attempt to change those rules was met with a lot of opposition from the Wisconsin agricultural community.
Oh, yeah. Farmers and landowners were very vocal about their opposition.
Yeah.
They understand how important it is to keep American land under American control.
Absolutely. It's about food security, national security, and local control.
Right.
And then in 2014, things took another turn.
Okay.
Robin Vos, who was already Assembly Speaker, he asked the Attorney General for a legal opinion on a specific international treaty. It's called GATS.
Okay.
He wanted to know if this treaty basically overruled Wisconsin's own rules about foreign ownership of farmland.
Hold on. Why would he even question the state's right to control its own land?
Right. What was he hoping to achieve?
Yeah.
It's a curious request, for sure.
It is.
It seemed like he thought this treaty might give foreign entities the okay to buy up Wisconsin farmland, regardless of what the state laws said.
Wow.
He basically wanted to know if Wisconsin could even legally prevent that from happening.
So what did the Attorney General say?
Well, the AG clarified that while the treaty allows for larger land purchases by foreign entities for certain things, like service-based purposes,
Okay.
Wisconsin law still restricted the purchase of farmland,
Okay.
so there were still legal protections in place
Gotcha.
to prevent a mass sell-off of farmland to foreign buyers.
But the fact that he even asked that question is what's so interesting.
Yeah.
It was just a year after Walker's push to open up farmland and his trip to China.
Makes you wonder, right?
It does.
Seems like there's a lot of interest in making Wisconsin farmland more available to foreign buyers.
Yeah.
Even with all the concerns from people in Wisconsin.
And this is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
Fast forward to 2024, and this bill, AB269, is introduced, and it's designed specifically to restrict Chinese ownership of Wisconsin farmland.
And this is where Representative Janelle Brandtjen comes in.
Right.
She's been very vocal about her concerns regarding Speaker Vos and his connections to China, especially when it comes to this bill.
Yeah, she's making some serious accusations.
She is.
Saying that Vos blocked AB269 because of his ties to organizations that are linked to the CCP.
Right.
What evidence does she have for these claims?
Well, she points to a couple of things that raise some questions about possible conflicts of interest.
Okay.
First, there's this trip Vos took to Wuhan, China, back in 2016.
Oh, yeah?
It was funded by the State Legislators Leadership Foundation, an organization that's been criticized for its connections to the Chinese government.
Wuhan. That name definitely rings a bell after everything that's happened.
Right.
Yeah.
And then in 2023, Vos went on another trip, this time to Copenhagen. It was sponsored by the Energy Foundation China.
Okay.
Now, this organization is based in San Francisco,
Okay.
but it's known for promoting cooperation on climate change between the U.S. and China.
So I've got 2 trips with possible ties to Chinese interests.
Right.
Is there anything more concrete that links Vos's actions to those connections?
Well, in 2019, Vos publicly praised a representative of the Chinese People's Association for friendship with foreign countries.
Okay.
Now, this organization has been identified as a major player in the CCP's efforts to influence things overseas.
So we've got these trips, a public statement praising a CCP-linked organization, and Brandtjen's accusations that Vos worked to block legislation aimed at restricting Chinese ownership of Wisconsin farmland.
Yeah.
What are we supposed to make of all this? Is there a pattern here?
It's a lot to think about, that's for sure.
It is.
And it's important to note that in 2020, then Secretary of State Mike Pompeo actually issued a warning about the CCP's influence campaigns targeting state-level officials.
Really?
Yeah, he said these campaigns were becoming more intense.
Wow.
And he urged officials to be careful about accepting things like trips or funding from any individuals or organizations linked to China.
And yet it seems like Vos went ahead with these trips anyway and continued to engage with these groups.
Yeah.
That's a pretty bold move, considering those warnings.
It definitely raises some questions about whether Vos actions have been influenced by these connections to China.
Right.
And if so, what does that mean for Wisconsin?
Yeah.
What does it mean for the whole country?
That's a great place to stop for now.
Okay.
When we come back, let's look at the possible consequences of these actions.
Okay.
And what this all means for the future of policy in Wisconsin.
Sounds good. So before the break, we were talking about Representative Brandtjen and her accusations that Speaker Vos blocked AB 269, you know, the one about restricting Chinese ownership of Wisconsin farmland.
Right, and she thinks that's connected to those trips Vos took that were funded or sponsored by organizations linked to the CCP.
Exactly, and it's really important for people to understand that Brandtjen isn't just making this stuff up. She's connecting Vos's actions to a bigger strategy that the Chinese government is using to influence American policy.
Right.
And not just at the federal level, but at the state and local levels, too.
And we have that warning from Mike Pompeo back in 2020 when he was Secretary of State. Right. He specifically said that the CCP was targeting state-level officials with these kinds of influence campaigns.
His warning was really specific, you know? He even cautioned officials about accepting trips to China. Especially ones funded by organizations with ties to the CCP.
It's like he knew what Vos was up to.
Yeah, it really makes you think.
So knowing all this, what are the implications?
Right.
It seems like we've uncovered some pretty serious questions about Vos's relationship with China.
We have.
And how that might have affected his actions as Speaker of the Assembly.
The implications are huge, potentially, if a foreign government, especially one like China,
Right.
you know, with their history of human rights abuses and their aggressive geopolitical goals, if they're successfully influencing American policy, it undermines our whole democracy.
It really does.
It also makes you question, you know, who's really in charge here.
Exactly, and it raises questions about accountability. If elected officials are making decisions based on foreign influence instead of what their constituents want,
Yeah.
who's holding them accountable?
That's the big question, isn't it? And it's one that deserves a lot more attention, not just in Wisconsin, but all over the country.
I agree.
We need to be really careful about foreign influence at every level of government.
So let's focus back on Wisconsin for a second.
Okay.
We've talked a lot about concerns about foreign ownership of farmland.
Right.
Can you break down the arguments for and against allowing foreign entities to buy Wisconsin land?
Sure. So people who support foreign investment, they often say that it helps the economy, creates jobs, brings in money.
Right.
They might point to something like the Foxconn deal.
Oh, yeah, Foxconn.
Yeah.
That was a big deal a few years ago.
It was.
Can you remind us what happened?
So back in 2017, Wisconsin offered Foxconn, this Taiwanese electronics company,
Right.
a huge package of tax breaks and incentives to build a factory here.
Yeah, it was supposed to be this big game changer for Wisconsin's economy. Right. Thousands of new jobs.
Yeah, and Speaker Robin Vos was a big supporter of the deal, wasn't he?
He was.
He said it would turn Wisconsin into a tech hub and attract other businesses.
Yeah, but it didn't quite work out that way, did it?
Not exactly. Foxconn scaled back their plans a bunch of times.
Yeah.
And those jobs they promised, they never really materialized.
Yeah, it ended up costing Wisconsin taxpayers a lot of money.
It did.
And we didn't get much in return.
So the Foxconn deal could be seen as a kind of warning about foreign investment.
Yeah, a cautionary tale.
Right. It shows how important it is to really scrutinize these deals.
Right.
And make sure they actually benefit the state and its people.
And it's interesting to think about Foxconn in the context of our conversation about Speaker Vos and China.
How so?
Well, Foxconn is a Taiwanese company, but they have a lot of ties to China.
Right. Their supply chains, their business operations.
Exactly.
That's a good point.
Makes you wonder if Vos's support for the Foxconn deal was influenced by his connections to China
It does.
or his overall views on foreign investment,
It's definitely something to think about.
especially with all these concerns about potential conflicts of interest.
Absolutely. This whole thing just highlights the need for transparency and accountability from our government.
Right.
Voters need to know if their elected officials are making decisions based on, what's best for them.
Yeah.
Or if foreign influence is playing a role.
It's been a wild ride so far.
It has.
We've covered national security concerns, international treaties, potential economic influence.
Yep.
And these specific accusations against Speaker Vos.
And we've only scratched the surface here.
I know, right?
There's still a lot more to uncover about Speaker Vos's relationship with China.
Right.
And how it's affecting Wisconsin policy.
It's crazy, right? We started with these national security concerns about farmland. Then we got into the whole economic influence thing with Foxconn. And now we've got these serious accusations against Speaker Vos.
And the thing is, this isn't just happening in isolation. There's this growing awareness, all over the place, at the federal level and in states like Wisconsin, that China is actively trying to influence things here in the U.S.
So what can we even do about it?
Well, transparency is key.
Okay.
Voters need to know if their elected officials have any conflicts of interest.
Right.
Like financial ties, trips paid for by foreign groups, that kind of thing.
Makes sense.
So stronger disclosure rules could be a good first step.
Yeah, more transparency would definitely help voters make better decisions.
Exactly.
What about at the state level? Are there policies that could help protect Wisconsin's farmland and other resources from ending up in foreign hands?
Oh, for sure. There are definitely options.
Yeah.
Some states have already made their rules about foreign land ownership stricter, like limiting how much land foreign entities can buy. Others have focused on increasing oversight of foreign investments,
Right.
especially in areas like agriculture and tech.
Yeah, Wisconsin already has some restrictions, but we saw how Vos questioned whether they were even enforceable because of that GATS treaty.
Right, and that shows just how complicated this whole thing is.
Yeah.
It's not just about state laws, it's about international agreements and the bigger geopolitical picture.
Right.
So we need a multi-pronged approach, for sure.
Okay, so I know this might seem like we're getting really deep into policy and international relations stuff, but here's why this matters to everyone listening.
Okay.
This goes beyond just farmland or economic interests.
Right.
This is about the integrity of our democracy.
Absolutely.
If foreign governments can influence our elected officials, it weakens our whole system of government.
It raises the question, who's really making the decisions?
Next.
It's about making sure those decisions are made with the people in mind.
Right.
Not for the benefit of some foreign power.
This deep dive has been really eye-opening. We've uncovered some complex and concerning connections, and it's clear there's still a lot more to learn about Speaker Vos's relationship with China and the whole issue of foreign influence in Wisconsin.
What's important now is that we as citizens keep asking questions.
Yeah.
Demand transparency from our leaders and have these important conversations about how we can protect our democracy.
Right, and make sure our leaders are accountable to the people they represent.
Exactly.
We focused on Robin Vos in this episode, but this issue goes way beyond just one politician.
It does.
So as you go about your day, we want you to think about this.
Yeah.
What other ways might foreign governments be trying to influence decisions here in Wisconsin? And what can you do as an informed citizen to make sure our leaders are putting our interests first? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.